Welcome to the Word. I'm your host, Scott Rubin, and let's get going. You know, the verses that we are going to discuss in today's show were especially challenging for me to grasp. I actually found myself looking at parts of a single verse and accepting its truth on its face value. And just a few words later, in the same verse, approaching it as if the truth was heavily veiled, and in order for me to extract understanding, I had to peel the onion real deep. In one verse. So I'm thinking, what am I doing? So I called a rabbi. I called a rabbi. And I asked, is this, what I'm doing, my approach, is this in the realm of acceptability? This approach to Torah study? And he tells me, yeah, it's consistent. It's called Perez, actually. It's an acronym. That Judaism teaches that there are 4 levels to study the 5 books of Moses, the Torah. Peshat, the literal reading. Remez, the allegorical reading through text hint or allusion. Derash, the metaphorical reading through like a rabbinic sermon. You compare it to like a midrash, they call it. So a rabbi makes a sermon and then you look at the verse and you compare it back and forth. And then there's Sod, the hidden meaning reading through text secret or mystery. It's like Kabbalah. Now, how awesome is that? I mean, think about it. There's no right or wrong in studying it. If only they had practiced those levels of studying in high school, I may have really excelled. Instead of those damn math tests that would come back to haunt me. What's this? What is a 72? Really? I got a 72 in trigonometry? There's something wrong, Mrs. Thompson. Sorry, Mr. Rubin. This is trigonometry now. You need to understand what pi means already. You need to study more. But I did. I explored pi studying on the Sod level. I know its hidden meaning. Of course I didn't. But that wasn't on the test. Maybe I did know its hidden meaning. But in high school, they only teach you one way. But in Torah, you get 4. I'd be a doctor today if they had laid down some sod at my school. At the very least, there wouldn't have been as many knee injuries on the football field. All right, it's a sod joke. I never made one. I had to go for it. Look, so last week we left off with Genesis chapter 2, verse 8. And the Lord God planted a garden in Eden from the east, and he placed there the man who he had formed. And now we move on to Genesis 2, verse 9. And the Lord God caused to sprout from the ground every tree pleasant to see and good to eat, and the tree of life in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Wow. A tree of life. I wouldn't want to be around when the leaves start falling off that tree. You know, like, this is it. Oh, man. There's a lot here with these 2 trees. So with the tree of life, I'll take more of the surface level approach, the Peshat, and we'll leave the Sod level, the hidden meaning, for the tree of good and evil. In fact, we'll just leave the tree of good and evil to the next segment, because that's a lot of stuff. Now, what gets me here is why God would have to give us a tree of life. I mean, you know, there's flowers and there's trees all over and bearing fruit everywhere around, and man, everywhere in the garden. But always that one tree, you know, he gives us this tree of life. You know, think about it. A tree of life. I'm going to just go with that. You build a house around that one tree. You know, there's always that one tree that you can't cut down, right? And it seems to embody all our life experiences. The tree of life. And then again, maybe it's just wood. I don't know. But tonight we're going to find out because we have guests. We have guests to talk about if there is actually a special tree, a tree of life, and we all have experienced it. So let's get right to it. Tonight we have Ryan Moses, the co-creator of the Take No Prisoners comedy assault show, Roast Battle. By the way, there is absolutely no through line from that show to him being here tonight, other than his spectacularly relevant name, Brian, as a Life of Brian, the greatest comedy film about religion ever made. Oh, and the Moses thing. Yeah, that's interesting. All right. Next up, we have Frankie, the famed TV host from France, who moved to America a few years ago. How you doing, man? Welcome. And we've
doing great.
Talking some Torah in various languages. So we move on to, yes, she may be a free spirit, but she manages to get paid for every show. The wonderful actress, contemplator, and my sidekick, Jackie Venny. Hi, Jack. Welcome to the show. He's a man, an actual man alone on a stage. No trees, no flowers, no food, only a mic. No wonder he has the need to kill an audience. My co-host, stand-up comedian, Mr. Sandy Danto. Let's get right to it. Ryan Moses. Ryan, is there a tree of life? Do we all have one in our life? Did you ever have one tree that you, as a kid, that you kind of went, wow, and you had to climb it, you had to do it, and one day it might have been gone? You ever have any experience like that?
Oh, but I did read A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, and I felt really close to it because I listened to Jay-Z a lot as a kid.
Oh, there you go. So it all worked out for you. Hey, Jackie, you there? You like to run in the woods?
Yeah,
a tree?
There was definitely a tree growing up, a special tree growing up that I would go into and get stuck in all the time because I climbed way too high each time. But also, this reminds me of this woman called Julia Butterfly Hill, and she was this woman who saved thousands of acres in the redwood forest because she went up. They're about to go cut it down, and she went up in the tree and lived in it for 2 years.
Wow.
They're thousands of years old, and they're so unimaginably big that they definitely hold a presence that's bigger than just
a normal tree.
Yeah.
Shrub.
Well, yeah, that being said, but I do think that all trees are the tree of life because, we do need all of them. We can't just have one. They're symbiotic. They breathe out what we breathe in.
I don't know if I agree with that all trees are a tree of life. I think there's some trees that just kind of give you fruit, and they're kind of like, you could cut them down. And then there's like some real special trees, like all those redwoods. Sandy, what do you think?
I agree with you. Is every tree really pleasant to see? I've never really understood the gimmick of those bonsai trees. I especially hate cottonwood trees, I'm allergic to them. It looks like they're growing white pubes, and they're a little triggering for my taste.
I will defend the trees. All trees are the trees of life, and I think you guys are just bitter.
Hey, Frankie, so what do you think? Do trees have special powers?
For me, the tree of life represents the connection, represents God and our connection and our work to get closer to God. The process, the tree is essential to Jewish life. We celebrate the New Year of trees. It's called Tu B'Shvat, which is, could you believe it? We have one special day when we celebrate the New Year of trees. This is just amazing. And the tree is key, is in the center of Jewish life.
Ryan, any of this connected with you in terms of what anybody said here about trees?
Trees? It does make sense. I mean, we're talking about birds and bees. I mean, you don't get the flower and the bee without the tree. So the tree does kind of symbolize, I guess, what life is. You grow, you bear fruit, you give shelter, you give shade, you give light.
That's good. That's good. Hey, it's time to take a break, and when we come back, we'll finish out this verse, and we'll get to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is that's where it all begins. We're back. Welcome to the Word. Genesis 2, verse 9. And the Lord God caused to sprout from the ground every tree pleasant to see and good and eat, and the tree of life, which we just discussed. But we continue in the midst of the garden and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Uh-oh. Now, that's a plan I'm not sure I've ever had in the back. You know, it's not something you ever hear landscapers say, well, we'll put in the shrubs here, maybe put a little jasmine, a little gardenias here, some poplar trees to define your property line, and, you know, give you some privacy. Oh, I know it would work in the front porch right by it. We could plant a tree of knowledge of good and evil right there. Wonderful shade. Kids can build a treehouse. Anytime your eyes gaze upon it, it's that you will not have 1 minute of peace ever. Yes, welcome to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Really? I'm in paradise. Man's in paradise over here. It's a friggin' Garden of Eden. Why do I need this tree? But God adds it. He adds it. Who cares about good and evil when you're in a state of perfect bliss, immersed with God's life force? But yet we got this tree in the garden in paradise. Could it be that man's purpose on earth is not to exist in a state of bliss, but to engage in some way with the concepts and forces of good and evil? I'm good with perfect bliss. There's no bills, no low credit ratings, you know, you don't miss your rent. I mean, you don't miss all the, just fill in the blank what you missed. I want bliss. I want a rent-free, endless beauty. That sounds good to me. I want a frolic for eternity. Or do I? I don't know. Maybe I don't. Recently, I went to Yellowstone National Park. It was unbelievable. And the spectacular vistas, snow-capped mountains, lakes, herds of buffalo winding through the valleys. And it was bliss. I'm telling you, it was actual bliss. But after a couple of days, I started saying, we got to get back. We got to move on. I got to build stuff. Whatever it is, I had to do it. Instead of, pondering how can my wife and I live in this park or nearby for the rest of our lives, all I could think about was it's time, like, I got to get back and deal with that new water filter thing. What's that about? I was in paradise. Why wasn't I thinking how to stay there? But I didn't. Nearly all of us somehow always have to leave paradise. We're always tempted by that damn tree of knowledge of good and evil. Ugh. Of course all of us want to be in a perfect state of bliss. But apparently it doesn't seem to be our purpose as a man on earth to stay on a mountaintop endlessly contemplating God and basking in his wondrous creations. What is this tree of good and evil? Why does it draw us in every time? We seem to always come down from the mountain. We think our ultimate purpose is to find eternal happiness. But is our need, our destiny much different? To bash and mash things down here on earth? My brother told me this story. He ran into this Boston Red Sox fan a few months after they won the World Series. For the first time in 100 years, and it was a big deal. And the fans were ecstatic for weeks. They were in baseball bliss. But then something happened. Something didn't quite feel right. They didn't feel like Red Sox fans anymore. Long suffering was gone. The yearning for something better, the hope of next year, it was all gone. The intricacies and discussions of how to make the team better, blaming the managers, blaming the players. Somehow the suffering seemed, in the long run, in a strange way, more fulfilling than the winning. The winning was great, but the suffering to win seemed like a more fulfilling breath of existence. Man's purpose on earth is maybe not to be a perpetual state of bliss, or God, he wouldn't have created the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The journey of our soul is to be in bliss until it becomes meaningless, and then back to the struggle, only to eventually return to the bliss. And the cycle repeats. The Kabbalah, Jewish mystic thought, explains the bread of shame. In some previous reality, we were at God's throne, endlessly absorbing his love and light. However, at some point it became completely meaningless to receive it. We didn't do anything to earn it. The love, and the endless light. Think about it. In Los Angeles, I could drive you up to the top of Mulholland Drive right now. We could pull over and stop and look out at that spectacular view of the valley. It's like amazing. And after a couple of minutes, everyone gets in and goes, all right, let's go. Come on. But if we had to climb that hill for hours and then got to the top of Mulholland, well, it'd be a little bit of a different experience. We'd probably hang out there a lot longer and take a good long look at that view. Apparently, man's purpose on earth is to not be in a state of endless happiness, but to discover that happiness while being engaged with the daily machinations of life. If it's only an island paradise, eventually you'll want to return to the mainland. Okay, Jackie, if anyone could pull it off to not engage with the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it's you. How long can a person avoid engaging the tree of knowledge of good and evil? Can you avoid it? Can you stay in a state of bliss in nature, paradise, garden?
I think that it's really interesting because I think that everybody has a different tree of evil in their life. I don't think that we all have the same one, if that makes sense. And I think that maybe it's not about not engaging with the knowledge in the tree of evil, but engaging with it in a way that can positively benefit you. Even though it might be inherently negative, it doesn't have to negatively impact you. Does that make sense?
I don't know how life could never negatively impact. I don't know of such things. I don't know. Brian Moses.
Yes, this book. Yes.
Why did God put the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden? What was he thinking?
It sounds like he needed it sounds like God is bored. If you read it objectively, the Torah, it sounds like God is bored. He needed something kind of poke at a little bit. He's like, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll give them a whole tree of knowledge and see if they want to learn some things. And I guess what they learned was there is an A and a B story. Every good story has conflict. So it can't just be all happiness. You're going to need a little bit of conflict just to make it interesting for God to watch.
I would prefer not having conflict. I'm good. I'm good with no conflict whatsoever. I'm good with bliss. On the surface, at least, I'm thinking, man, all I want is eternal happiness.
All right, so then you don't want knowledge because ignorance is bliss, right? Knowledge is power.
Ignorance is bliss. Wow, that is awesome. That's exact. So I have to be a total schmuck to basically have paradise. Wow. Sandy Danto. Are you on drugs right now, Sandy? Is that how you're eternal bliss?
Scott, I wish. Believe me. If it were possible to have a 2-year-old daughter and be responsible and be on drugs, I would be the first one to be doing that. But I am not on drugs. I feel like I might be because I'm paranoid, because when I read this passage, I couldn't get past the words tree of knowledge of good and evil. I couldn't. I'm like, what? I got trees judging me now? My extended Jewish family isn't enough? Now I've got to worry about a shrub making snide remarks about my posture? What do I, like, I need plants judging me? What is this about? It's not fair. But there is, I've noticed in our exploration of Genesis, there is a thematic pattern, and it's of duality. And it's been explored here between paradise and struggle. And just like Brian said, you can have paradise nonstop if you're willing to just not have any knowledge, and you need to struggle and fight and learn and earn that knowledge in order to get it. And so all throughout the verses of Genesis we've studied, there's this duality of opposites: day and night, water and land, heaven and earth, good and evil, mayonnaise and Miracle Whip, all polar opposites, good and bad versions of each other.
And Miracle Whip.
It's a little bit later in Genesis. They
Maybe
talk
mayonnaise and avocado mayonnaise or something. Now you got me thinking. What is the ranch dressing? Is the yang to mayonnaise? What is the yang to mayonnaise? Not Miracle Whip.
That's the great
soy
question.
sauce, maybe. I don't know.
Charger, Cool Whip.
Well, there's something there. Hey, Frankie, what do you think?
You know, it would have been amazing not to worry about how to make a living, to be able to run naked all day. But unfortunately, it's different. You know what I'm thinking is, how can you name something bliss if you don't know the difference between good and evil? Is it really bliss to be ignorant and not asking yourself the right question if you're making the right decision, the right choice? So we had to eat the apple. And also in that, it could be a Netflix series. In that moment, don't forget that there was a snake who tried to persuade.
You jump ahead, Frankie. We're not there yet. Don't go there.
Okay.
That's another episode. Just to respond to you, Frankie. Running naked is actually not something on my list of lists. Okay, I think,
But
trees would kill themselves.
I was born in France.
Yeah, it's not something on the list. But but running, free with a full covering would be nice. Yeah. I guess that's frolicking for me, Sandy. All right. Hey, when we come back.
I would love to watch you frolic, Scott.
You don't want to see. Hey, we'll come back. We're going to go to the next verse, and God help this show. God help us. Welcome back to the Word. We continue with Genesis chapter 2, verse 10. And a river flowed out of Eden to water the garden. And from there it separated and became four heads, that the life force, or all the realities of man's earthly existence, of God, flowed out of the garden and was broken up into four pathways. Amazing. Each river, some aspect of the life force that resides in the garden. You know, as I mentioned at the top of the show, that the Torah can be explored on four levels, each level revealing a certain truth of our existence. It's curious that there's four rivers, four heads, just like how we study Torah. You know, that's incredible. But let's continue. Genesis chapter 2, verse 11. The name of one is Pishon. That is the one that encompasses all the land of Havilah, where there is gold. And continuing with verse 12, and the gold of that land is good. There is the crystal and the onyx stone. And let's just finish up this section with verse 13 and 14. And the name of the second river is Gihon. That is the one that encompasses all the land of Cush. And 14, and the name of the third river is Tigris. That is the one that flows to the east of Assyria. And the fourth river, that is the Euphrates. Huh. Okay, a lot of rivers. It seems to me that those might be the pathways in which we choose to live our earthly existence. Maybe the gold, like, is indicative of a pathway of a material existence. You know, we're not revealed the others for some reason. We're only revealed this one with the goal. The others, we're left to imagine what they might be. But we don't really know what these other heads, these other rivers are. It's a mystery. I imagine like Robert Frost's legendary poem. Everybody remembers this. Somewhere, ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. Which river are we going to take in our life existence? Sandy, you had a jet ski in the Garden of Eden. Which river would you go down? Which river would you fly down, Sandy, out of the Garden of Eden? Because I see you on that jet ski, baby. You got to pick one. Where are you going? Materials? Are you going a spiritual river? Which river? Or am I just completely off base, Sandy?
Scott, you're blowing my mind right now. The idea of being on a jet ski in the Garden of Eden is like something that I would dream up while I see things that are in my background. But I wouldn't need to go down the material river because I'm already on a jet ski. So I would want to go down the spiritual path because that's what would make me feel spiritual, is taking that ride. I like how each river symbolizes something different and of importance to our life in the material world and the spiritual world.
Well, why does he not finish it up? Is it supposed to be a mystery? Are we supposed to take the road less traveled?
Yes, it's two things. First, we're in the very beginning of the book, but I think part of it is that, yes, we do have to discover things for our own and journey out and maybe find paradise, maybe struggle, but we're only supposed to know what is told to us, and the rest we've got to find for ourselves.
Ryan, what do you think? You think you have any idea what these other rivers might be?
Well, struggle builds character, and character builds cool people, you know. I love your voice, Scott, so I can only imagine what you've been through. Sandy's got a deep, fun voice, too, so I can imagine what his character is and what rivers he's gone down. Jackie and French Frankie, similar voices, really fun and festive. I don't know which river they're going down or what kind of transportation they're taking down these rivers. But I think you have to struggle just like with the knowledge of good and evil. You're going to need all four rivers to kind of figure out who you're going to be.
And all rivers do lead to the ocean. So maybe it's not just about going down one single river, choosing one single path, but being in the ocean and witnessing and being a part of all of them together. And do we really choose what river we go down, or does the river choose us?
Whoa.
Whoa.
Whoa. Whoa. Everybody went.
Whoa.
Frankie, do you have an answer to that question? Do we choose which direction we go, or does it choose us?
I think if we are lucky, we get to choose ourselves. If we have the opportunity to grow spiritually and find a path, find a way, in that case, we will find our own river, the river that is good for us. Otherwise, life will take you somewhere, and hopefully it will be to a nice place. For me, I will use either river to get as far as possible from Eve, because the first day of our relationship, she put me in trouble. So I want to get far away from this woman.
The woman's not there yet. You're jumping ahead again. Bad boy.
I'm sorry.
Bad Torah study.
Spoiler alert.
We don't even have the name of the man yet. Okay, he hasn't even been named.
Okay.
But we have that tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the rivers. We have the rivers, and there's a guy there.
So what you're asking me basically is to slow down, right?
I'm just saying, in our pathways that we somehow live down here for some purpose to somehow connect ultimately with God, there's seems to be indicated here that there's multiple pathways that we can discover this life energy. And God seems to only reveal the material plane and leaves it up to us to figure out what these other heads are. All right, when we come back, our final segment. Welcome back to the Word. We continue with Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. Now the Lord God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to guard it. Interesting. That God has man work the garden and to guard the garden. But who is he guarding the garden from? I mean, it's just one guy. I mean, there's only one guy on the whole planet. Why do you have to guard it? Working it, all right. Nobody. I knew it was going to be ruined, the bliss, but guarding it—that's one I just don't get. Sandy Danto, why do we have to guard the garden? Who are we guarding it from?
I've got a few theories on this. Okay, it's the beginning of creation. God's still workshopping some things, doesn't know what may or may not go wrong, what creations might malfunction. Really, he made Adam and Eve as the first market research group. And okay, so or they're the people, or they're the people in Borat who don't know the joke's on them, and God is Sacha Baron Cohen.
God's punking Adam and Eve.
Exactly. God is Ashton Kutcher, or Chance the Rapper if you got Quibi. Nobody has Quibi, so Ashton Kutcher. I don't know. Here's what I really think about it. Maybe we have just seen in Genesis beasts be spoken of, animals be spoken of, and maybe if there aren't any other humans to be guarded against and other threats are TBD, it's just a way for God to instill some responsibility and value and purpose in man. The way your parents make you make your bed when you're a kid. Who on earth is entering a child's bedroom that would care about judging the aesthetic nature of whether or not the bed is made? Who gives a crap? But it's important to start early with those habits to create a sense of pride and importance and value. So I think that's just what is being done here.
Very good, Sandy. Very good. And, especially that parents thing, where your kid, the parents leave and go, okay, you have to watch the house now, and watch the dog and take care of the house. Of course, you're 7, you're 8, and the first time without the babysitter, and you're freaking out. And you got to guard the house. Of course, you're not going to guard the house from anybody, but you're being given the kind of a responsibility, right? So
exactly, you never do it better than those first few times because you're really taking it super seriously.
You're taking it super seriously, even though they know they wouldn't give you that responsibility if, in fact, there really was a monster on the other side. But they kind of make you think you're getting that responsibility, and you kind of take it on, and you feel kind of like, wow, I have purpose.
Right, it's an exhibition game. You're not playing in the playoffs here.
Brian, what do you think?
I think it's with guarding the tree of knowledge of the garden. I think it's a way to instill fear, and fear is a way to control. So I think it's kind of it's that God fearing. It's God instilling fear and controlling now the creation of man. Basically, is what it tells me.
So he's saying guard it. So are you saying that by him saying you need to guard the garden? That's like the first time that man is actually experiencing a sense of fear that there's something that he needs to be guarded. There could be something bad that could happen. So I need to. Wow. I mean, so they're taking on the first sense of like, oh my God, what do you mean guarding?
Exactly.
If it was me, man, I'd go, hey, you need to guard the place. What from what? For what? Wait.
Exactly.
This can end? Someone's going to come and plow this down? What's going to happen?
Yeah, there's milk, there's honey, there's a tree full of apples here. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what could happen right now? So then that instills the fear. You're like, okay, I'm not going to be here forever. And now you're like, okay, now there's a lifespan, or there's something out there that could dominate me. So now there's food chain in your brain. Like, oh, what can kill me? What can harm me? What this milk, honey, this person next to me? I know we're getting ahead, but there's definitely a remote control factor that God has now.
Well, there's food, by the way. In the 2 verses earlier, we have food, we have flowers, we have honey.
What I think God is doing, he's instilling the remote control, being like, I can turn this channel whenever I want.
Jackie, what do you think?
I kind of agree a little bit with both of the opinions just said. Like, it kind of seems like God is kind of on a roll right now. He just created the earth, just created the garden. You know, he's on a roll. He's getting there. He's like, I don't know what else I might create. Someone should guard this. I could create a freaking dinosaur. It could eat all the things. Someone should guard it just in case I get a little crazy.
God's a madman.
Yeah, he doesn't know. Even he doesn't know what he's capable of. He's like, well, I just did a really banging job on this, whatever it is. Who knows what's coming next? Someone should protect this. Sure.
And there is a sense. What about Frankie? You have anything to add on this notion of guarding the garden?
It sends the message. I agree. It instills fear. And that fear is very important because at some point of time you realize, oh, I'm not by myself. Who's there? Right. And you start thinking differently. When you think that you are the only one, you think in one way. When you're not the only one, it changes the whole game. And at the same time, that fear is very interesting because in general, in any religion, you can see that people believe in God because they fear God or they love God. And I've always found it very interesting to choose if you believe in God and you fear him or her, I don't know, or if you believe in God because of love of God. And I think that get us back to the rivers. If you choose to believe in God for the fear of God, you choose a different river than if you believe in God because of the love of God.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Sandy, you have something to add on that?
I am just kind of flabbergasted because I guess it's something I always knew but never explored, the idea that the belief in God is either out of love or fear. I always just pictured most people's belief being out of fear. And this verse definitely exemplifies that. But when you bring up the idea of believing in God strictly out of love and not out of fear, and just doing it to be like, hey, God asked me to do this, and who am I to be like, no, I'm not in the mood. It's God. I love God. I love him. Like, for the first time, I think, in my entire life, I've thought of the idea of loving God. And it's kind of blowing my mind right now.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that, Sandy.
It's something that it just had never occurred to me, and that of course, so many people do. You know, and maybe one day I will be one of those people. But it just never occurred to me. My worldview and my idea of religion is that people believe in God out of this fear of the afterlife or instant karma or karma in general or some iteration of that concept. And so the idea of just obeying out of love, that's something now I'm wrapping my head around, but I also just kind of always thought that was like a cult thing, but cults use fear more so. And religion, I'm now realizing, is more love-based. It has the fear. It certainly has the fear part down very well. But it's more love. Thanks, Frankie.
Yeah, Frank. Yeah, that was great.
Sandy, great. That's it really is. I mean, that's what we're kind of doing here. We're trying to, connect with this and see if we can learn anything. So, all right, hey guys, thanks for coming on. It's a real blessing to have all of you. You were wonderful. Hey, what's going on, Brian Moses? What do you got coming up in your career? Anything we should know about?
I've got a group of people to lead through a sea. No, I'm. You can catch me every Friday at the Comedy Store. Just log on to the Roast Battle YouTube, and you can see Roast Battle every Friday night. And that's what we're doing now through the pandemic. We're just doing quarantine pandemic roast battles.
Wow, awesome! Man.
Every Friday at 8 p.m.
Every Friday at 8 p.m.
Yeah.
Jackie, got anything happening? Your short film come out? Is it coming out?
Yeah, it should be coming out, but I think it got pushed to December. So there's that. I'm headed out to film next week in Virginia, but that probably won't come out for God knows how long. So
Oh, wow.
vote and be a good human and listen to other people who think differently than you and eat vegetable and an apple and drink some water.
And we have, Jackie, we have Before Future Boy is coming out October 16th. This sitcom that, if we could even call it that, it's some sort of hybrid of a hybrid of a hybrid. We don't know what to call it. But it's going to air, and it will be interesting when it does. Before Future Boy. Check it out. We star with a couple of other people. Sandy, what do you got happening?
Scott, people can always check out my podcast wherever they stream podcasts. MFers, a parenting podcast. I also have an album coming out called Daddy Boy. Anywhere you stream music, you'll be able to find it. YouTube, wherever. I got a movie on demand called Tar. It's a horror movie, perfect for spooky season. And beyond that, check out the Comedy Store documentary on Showtime. I might be in it.
Very nice. Frankie, what do you got happening? You moved to America from France. You were one of the great TV hosts there. Now what do you got happening?
Well, I'm working for a radio station based in France, and we are starting a new show called Postcard from Los Angeles, when we explore many things that are happening in LA, not only in the entertainment industry, but also in the well-being. All these trends that they say that California, in France, they consider California to be the epicenter of well-being. Everything that starts here and goes all around the world. So French are very interested in what is happening in Los Angeles. So that's the show that I'm starting in 40-something days, December 1st.
Very nice. Be careful how you use the word epicenter when you're talking to California. Very
I know.
Very afraid when you hear that word.
So
all right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.